The air inside the Sterling Hotel felt like wet concrete. My sister, Bella, gripped my shoulder to hold me down before Magnus Sterling. "Sir," she smiled, "this is the failure of our family." My parents nodded, their disdain haunting me for 32 years, but Magnus didn't laugh. He leaned in close, his cologne overpowering as he whispered, "I still have the blueprints. Ghost architect, tonight, I am paying my debt." My name is Nora Kingswell, and at 32 years old, I had mastered the art of becoming furniture. I stood near a towering arrangement of white lilies in the gilded ballroom of the Sterling Hotel. Holding a glass of lukewarm water that I pretended was vodka, the air around me smelled of expensive perfume, stale ambition, and the metallic tang of hypocrisy. This was the launch party for the Skyline Rebirth Project, an architectural marvel that promised to redefine the Chicago skyline. It was the crown jewel of the Sterling Corporation, and according to the banner hanging above the stage, it was the brainchild of my older sister, Bella Kingswell. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, a navy blue polyester blend I had purchased from a discount rack 3 years ago. It felt rough against my skin, especially when compared to the sea of silk and velvet swirling around me. I was not supposed to be here. I was never supposed to be in the light. My role in the Kingswell family was to be the shadow that made the light look brighter. My mother, a woman who treated motherhood like a public relations campaign, had called me 6 times that morning. Her voice had been sharp enough to cut glass. "You will come tonight, Nora," she had hissed. "Bella needs the family support, and for God's sake, try to look like you belong to us for once. Do not embarrass your sister with your poverty." So here I was, the prop, the contrast. Across the room, Bella was holding court. She looked radiant, I had to admit, though I knew the radiance was manufactured. She wore a custom gown encrusted with diamonds that caught the chandelier light, creating a halo around her that she certainly did not deserve. She was laughing at a joke made by a city councilman, her head thrown back, her hand resting casually on the arm of the man next to her. My parents, Robert and Susan Kingswell, flanked her like royal guards. They were glowing. This was their victory as much as hers. They had spent 3 decades investing every ounce of their energy, money, and love into Bella. I was merely the collateral damage of their parenting strategy. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. I declined. I needed a clear head. I needed to survive the next 2 hours without screaming. "Nora." The voice was my father's. It was not a greeting. It was a summons. I turned to see him waving me over. He was standing with a group of investors, men with silver hair and suits that cost more than my entire year's rent. I took a deep breath, fixed a neutral expression on my face, and walked over. "Gentlemen," my father said, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. The gesture looked affectionate to an outsider, but his fingers dug into my clavicle with a painful pressure. It was a warning. "This is our other daughter, Nora." The men smiled politely. One of them, a heavy-set man with a cigar in his pocket, asked, "Does she work at Sterling too? Brilliance must run in the family." My mother laughed. It was a tinkling, artificial sound. "Oh, heavens no. Nora is a free spirit. She helps out at a local library sometimes. She prefers a quieter life. Not everyone has Bella's drive. You know, a library assistant," the heavy-set man said, his interest evaporating instantly. "How quaint." "Actually," I started to say, "I work in technical." "She does odd jobs," my father interrupted, his voice booming over mine, his grip tightening on my shoulder until I nearly winced. "Unstable work. We worry about her, of course, but we are just so proud that Bella has taken the reins of the family legacy." I shut my mouth. The familiar taste of ash filled my throat. It had been this way since I was 5 years old. Bella was the sun. I was the burnt rock orbiting her, useful only for scale. I looked at Bella. She was watching the exchange with a smirk playing on her lips. She enjoyed this. She needed this. My mediocrity was the fuel for her supremacy. "Come on," Nora, Bella said, stepping forward and linking her arm through mine. Her skin was warm, clammy with excitement. Don't bore the investors. I want you to meet someone. The man of the hour. My stomach turned. Bella, I'd rather just stay by the… Nonsense, she whispered, her voice dropping to a venomous register only I could hear. You are going to come with me. You are going to smile. And you are going to let everyone see how gracious I am for dragging my loser sister to the event of the season. She pulled me through the crowd. The sea of bodies parted for her. She was the creative director of Skyline Rebirth. She was the queen of the night. I stumbled slightly in my worn-out heels, struggling to keep up with her aggressive stride. We stopped in front of a small group near the center of the room. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with electricity. In the center of the circle stood Magnus Sterling. I had seen him in magazines, on the news, and on the terrifying billboards that dotted the highway. But seeing him in person was different. He was a legend in Chicago, a real estate tycoon who had built half the city and bought the other half. He was in his 60s, but he stood with the posture of a general in wartime. His suit was black, tailored to perfection, and his eyes, steel gray and sharp as razors, seemed to dissect everything they looked at. The chatter around him died down as Bella approached. She squeezed my arm one last time, a silent command to look pathetic, and then released me. Mr. Sterling, Bella said, her voice dripping with honey. She curtsied slightly, a ridiculous gesture that somehow worked for her. I am so glad you could make it to the launch. Magnus Sterling turned slowly. He held a glass of dark amber liquid. He looked at Bella, his expression unreadable. It is my building, Ms. Kingswell. It would be odd if I were not here, Bella laughed, a little too loudly. Of course. Sir, I wanted to introduce you to someone. My family is here tonight to celebrate. And well, she gestured to me with an open palm, like a magician revealing a rabbit that had died in the hat. This is Nora, the failure of our family. The room went silent. It wasn't a polite silence. It was a vacuum. The guests nearby stopped chewing their hors d'oeuvres. My parents, standing just behind us, nodded solemnly, their faces arranging into masks of long-suffering martyrdom. They wanted this. They wanted the great Magnus Sterling to see the burden they carried. They wanted to be praised for raising a genius like Bella despite having to drag a dead weight like me. I stood there, clutching my cheap purse until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream that I had graduated summa cum laude. I wanted to scream that I understood the load-bearing ratios of the ceiling above us better than anyone in this room. But I said nothing. I stared at the floor, waiting for the humiliation to wash over me as it always did. But the laughter didn't come. Magnus Sterling did not chuckle. He did not offer a pitying smile. He took a step forward. The crowd instinctively stepped back. He took off his glasses, folding them deliberately and placing them in his breast pocket. He looked at Bella, and for a second, I saw a flash of something like boredom in his eyes. Then, his gaze shifted to me. He looked at my shoes, my dress, my hands, and then he looked into my eyes. It felt like being scanned by an X-ray machine. He stripped away the library assistant lie. He stripped away the failure label. He looked right at the thing I had hidden deep inside my chest for 10 years. Magnus broke the social distance. He stepped into my personal space, ignoring the gasps of the people around us. He was tall, looming over me. I could smell oak moss, cigar smoke, and pure, terrifying power. He leaned down. His lips were inches from my ear. I still have the blueprints. Ghost architect, he whispered. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating in my bones. And tonight, I am paying my debt. My heart stopped. Literally. For 1 second, I did not think blood pumped through my veins. I froze, my eyes widening. I looked up at him, terrified. How could he possibly know Magnus pulled back? He looked at me for 1 more second, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between us, and then the mask slammed back down. He turned to Bella. Bella looked confused. She looked at Magnus, then at me, then back at Magnus. Sir, is everything all right? Did she say something inappropriate? I can have security escort her out if she's bothering you. My mother stepped forward, wringing her hands. Mr. Sterling, please forgive Nora. She is not used to high society. If she offended you— Magnus raised a hand, silencing them. Ms. Kingswell, he said to Bella, his voice flat and professional. I want you in my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. We need to discuss the future of the Skyline project. Bella's confusion vanished, replaced instantly by euphoria. Her eyes lit up. The future, of course. I will be there, sir. Absolutely. 9 o'clock. She turned to my parents, mouthing the word promotion. My father pumped his fist subtly. My mother looked like she might faint with joy. They thought Magnus had whispered a reprimand to me. They thought he had been disgusted by my presence and was now turning to Bella to reward her for her competence. They were idiots, all of them. Enjoy the evening, Magnus said. He didn't look at me again. He turned and walked away, his security detail falling into formation around him like sharks. I stood there, trembling. The words echoed in my mind. Ghost architect. It was a name I had used only in encrypted emails, a name that was supposed to be dead. Did you hear that? Bella squealed, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. He wants to see me personally tomorrow morning. This is it, Nora, the vice presidency. I am finally getting what I deserve. She looked at me with a sneer. And you, whatever he said to you, I hope it taught you a lesson. Don't stand so close to important people. You make the air smell like desperation. I have to go, I whispered. Yes, you should. My mother agreed, shooing me away with her hand. Go home. We have real celebrating to do, and you do not fit the aesthetic. I didn't wait for a second dismissal. I turned and walked. Then I walked faster. Finally, I ran. I pushed through the heavy revolving doors of the Sterling Hotel and burst out onto the sidewalk. The Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow, biting through my thin coat, but I welcomed it. It felt real. The cold air scrubbed the scent of lilies and lies from my skin. I hailed a cab. Ignoring the cost, I just needed to be away. Where to? The driver asked, eyeing my frantic state in the rearview mirror. South Side, I said, giving him my address. And please, just drive. As the city lights blurred past the window, my mind raced back in time. They saw a failure. They saw a library assistant who couldn't hold down a job. They didn't know about the nights I spent awake until 4 a.m. They didn't know about the structural integrity reports I fixed while Bella was sleeping off a hangover. They didn't know that every major success Bella had claimed in the last 5 years, the Bridgeview Museum, the Harper Concert Hall, and now, the Skyline rebirth, had been built on the foundation of my work. I was the one who did the math. I was the one who understood the stress loads. I was the one who saved them from collapsing. And I had done it all from the shadows, letting Bella take the credit because it was the only way to keep the peace. It was the only way to survive in a family that required a golden child and a scapegoat. The cab pulled up to my building 40 minutes later. It was a crumbling brick structure in a neighborhood where the streetlights didn't always work. I paid the driver $50, including a generous tip because he hadn't asked questions and rushed inside. My apartment was on the 4th floor. There was no elevator. I climbed the stairs, my breath hitching in my throat. I unlocked my door with shaking hands and slammed it shut behind me, engaging all 3 deadbolts. The apartment was tiny. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner, and the radiator hissed like an angry cat. But it was mine, and it held my secrets. I threw my purse on the lumpy couch and went straight to the closet in the bedroom. I pushed aside the rack of cheap coats and knelt on the floor. I pulled up a loose floorboard in the corner, revealing a small, fireproof wall safe embedded in the concrete subfloor. I spun the dial. Right to 18, left to 4, right to 27. The heavy door clicked open. I reached inside and pulled out a thick roll of paper. I spread it out on the floor, the edges curling up. It was a set of architectural blueprints. The lines were precise, the calculations meticulous. It was the master design for the Skyline Rebirth Tower, but it wasn't the version Bella had presented tonight. It was the original, the safe one, the one that used the correct grade of steel and the proper wind bracing system. In the bottom right corner, where the lead architect's signature belonged, there was no Bella Kingswell. Instead, drawn in sharp, defiant black ink, were the initials that Magnus Sterling had somehow uncovered. N.K. I traced the letters with my finger. The game had changed. The shadows were no longer safe. Magnus knew, and if he knew, that meant he knew about the fraud, the stolen designs, and the danger the new building posed. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the empty room. "Tomorrow, everything burns." The morning after the gala, the sun did not rise. It merely turned the gray Chicago sky a lighter shade of slate. I buttoned my coat against the wind and headed for the train station, merging into the stream of commuters with the ease of a drop of water falling into an ocean. To my parents and Bella. I was heading to the dim, dusty stacks of the public library to reshelve paperbacks for minimum wage. That was the narrative they were comfortable with. It was safe. It was pathetic. In reality, I swiped my access card at a shared workspace in the Loop, a hive of glass and polished concrete occupied by startups and freelancers who valued anonymity. My desk was in the back corner, flanked by dual monitors that hummed with life as I sat down. I was not a librarian. I was a structural forensic consultant. When boutique architecture firms had a design that was failing stress tests, or when a contractor needed to know why their concrete was curing with microfractures, they called Vector, my primary alias. They paid me in cryptocurrency or through shell LLCs, and I fixed their mess before the buildings fell down. I pulled up a CAD file for a mid-rise in Denver. The load distribution on the cantilevered balcony was all wrong. The moment connection at the column interface would shear under anything more than a 40-mile-per-hour wind gust. Amateur work. I began to recalculate the truss geometry, my fingers flying across the keyboard. This was where I lived, in the math, in the physics, in the absolute, unyielding truth of gravity. Gravity did not care if your father was rich. Wind shear did not care if your sister was pretty. If the math was wrong, the structure failed. It was the only justice I had ever known. As I worked, the memory of Magnus Sterling's whisper from the night before cold-cocked me. Ghost architect. My hands paused over the keys. I closed my eyes and was instantly dragged back 10 years. I was 22, sitting on the floor of our dorm room, surrounded by drafting paper and empty coffee cups. Bella was on the bed, painting her nails, complaining about the smell of my graphite. We were both architecture majors, but only one of us attended classes. Bella spent her semesters networking at fraternity parties and charming professors during office hours. I spent mine doing 2 sets of coursework. "Just finished the rendering for the Eco Center, Nora," she had said, blowing on her wet polish. "Make sure the shading on the atrium is dramatic. Professor Holloway likes drama." I had done it. I designed a sustainable community center with a rainwater harvesting system integrated into the roof structure. It was brilliant. It was sleek. And when Bella presented it as her senior thesis, she didn't just get an A, she got the Dean's Award. She got a full scholarship for her master's degree. I got a pat on the back from our mother for helping Bella organize her schedule. That was the pattern, but the stakes got higher 5 years ago. I was working secretly, of course as a junior analyst for a firm that was subcontracting for the Sterling Corporation. Bella had landed a prestigious internship there, purely on the strength of the portfolio I had built for her. She was assigned to the North River Bridge project. It was a massive undertaking, a suspension bridge designed to handle heavy freight traffic. One night, Bella came home drunk, tossing a flash drive onto the kitchen counter. "Check the specs," she slurred. "My boss wants the final sign-off by morning. Just put my digital signature on it." I opened the files. It was a mess, but buried deep in the sub-assembly drawings for the suspension cables. I found it. The tensile strength rating for the main gusset plates was calculated using the wrong steel grade. They had spec'd a 36 steel instead of a 572. It was a clerical error, a typo perhaps, but the math was catastrophic. Under peak load, combined with thermal expansion during a Chicago summer, those plates would shear. The bridge wouldn't just sag, it would snap. I tried to tell Bella the next morning, "You're always so dramatic, Nora," she had snapped, nursing a hangover. "It's fine. The engineers checked it. Just submit it." She refused to listen. She refused to look. And I knew that if that bridge was built, people would die. Buses full of children, commuters, tourists, so I did the only thing I could. I went to an internet cafe 3 towns over. I routed my connection through a VPN in Estonia, and I wrote an email directly to Magnus Sterling's private encrypted server. I didn't just point out the error, I attached a corrected set of schematics, detailing the precise yield stress analysis and the necessary plate thickness to ensure a safety factor of 2.5. I signed it the Ghost. The project was halted 24 hours later. The error was found. The lead engineer was fired. Bella, miraculously, survived the purge because she claimed she had flagged it internally, but her email must have been lost. She took credit for my save. Again, but Magnus had noticed. He had publicly thanked the anonymous auditor, who saved the company $1 billion in lawsuits and thousands of lives. I snapped back to the present, my heart hammering against my ribs. Magnus knew. He had called me Ghost Architect. He hadn't just guessed. He knew. My phone rang. It wasn't my cell. It was the landline on my desk, a number that only 3 clients had. I picked it up, expecting a panicked contractor from Denver. "Nora Kingswell," a voice said. It wasn't a question. The voice was deeper than the ocean floor. It was Magnus Sterling. I froze. "Who is this?" "Do not insult my intelligence, and I will not insult yours." Magnus replied. The sound quality was crystal clear, devoid of the usual background static. "There is a black Lincoln Navigator waiting at the curb downstairs. You have 5 minutes. If you are not in it, I will assume you want your sister to continue designing the skyline of this city until she kills someone." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, exactly, but with a sudden, adrenaline-fueled clarity. He wasn't meeting Bella. It was 9 o'clock. Bella was probably sitting in his waiting room right now, practicing her surprised but humble face for her imaginary promotion. I grabbed my coat. The car was exactly where he said it would be. The driver, a mountain of a man with a neck as thick as a tree stump, opened the door without a word. I slid into the leather interior, which smelled of lemon oil. The windows were tinted so dark the city outside looked like a bruised plum. We didn't go to the Sterling Tower. We drove west, out of the loop, toward the industrial district along the river. The car wove through a maze of warehouses and eventually turned into a construction site that had been fenced off. The sign on the gate read, "Site C, Restricted Access." The car stopped. The driver opened my door. "Top floor," he grunted, pointing to a half-finished skeletal structure of steel and concrete rising out of the mud. I walked toward the construction elevator. It was a rough, open-air cage used for hauling materials. I rode it up, the wind whipping my hair across my face. The city expanding below me. When the cage rattled to a halt on the 20th floor, I stepped out onto a slab of raw concrete. There were no walls yet, just the steel girders and the open sky. Magnus Sterling was standing at the edge, looking out over the river. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo from last night. He was in a charcoal wool coat and a white hard hat. He didn't turn around as I approached. "The wind load at this altitude is 30% higher than at street level," he said, his voice carrying easily over the gust. "Most architects design for the static load. They forget that buildings are living things. They sway. They breathe. If you make them too rigid, they snap." I stopped 10 feet away from him. "You didn't bring me here for a lecture on aerodynamics, Mr. Sterling." He turned then. The sunlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked older in the daylight, the lines around his eyes etched deep with exhaustion. but his gaze was just as predatory. "No," he said. "I brought you here because you are the only person in your family who knows what a moment frame is." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up. It was a printout of an email header. "5 years ago, I received a tip about the North River Bridge," he said, walking slowly toward me. "It saved my company. It saved my reputation. I have a security team that consists of former Mossad agents and NSA analysts. It took them 3 years to track the signal back to an internet cafe in Oak Park. It took them another 2 years to cross-reference the linguistic patterns of that email with every architectural paper submitted in the state of Illinois in the last decade." He stopped right in front of me. "You use a specific syntax. Nora, you write numbers as words in your informal notes. You prefer the Oxford comma, and you have a distinctive habit of over-engineering the sheer walls by exactly 15% above code. It's a fingerprint, and I found that fingerprint all over Bella's work, her thesis, the museum, the concert hall." He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the concrete floor, pinned down by his expensive leather boot. "You are the ghost," he said. "You are the one who has been building my city. Bella is just the mannequin in the window." My throat felt dry. "Why are you telling me this? If you know, why didn't you expose her?" "Because until yesterday, I didn't care," Magnus said coldly. "Bella is a good salesperson. She looks good on a magazine cover. Investors like her. As long as the building stood up, I was willing to let the charade continue. I assumed she had hired a ghostwriter, a common practice. I didn't know it was her sister. I didn't know the genius was being treated like a servant." He walked past me, running his hand along a steel column. But then came Skyline Rebirth. The temperature in the air seemed to drop. "I saw the preliminary reports yesterday," Magnus said. "The ones Bella submitted. There are discrepancies, cost-cutting measures that I did not authorize, material swaps that make no sense." He turned back to me, his eyes dark. "I suspect she is not just incompetent anymore. Nora, I suspect she is corrupt. And incompetence I can manage. Corruption gets people killed." He took a step closer. I looked at the designs for the foundation of the new tower. The soil analysis was ignored. If we build it the way Bella wants, the South Tower will sink 3 inches within 5 years. The catastrophic failure probability is 17%. 17%. In structural engineering, anything over 1% is a nightmare. 17 was a death sentence. "She wouldn't," I whispered, though I knew she would. Bella didn't understand the numbers. She only understood the budget bonuses. If she could save $1 million on concrete, she would, never realizing she was buying a disaster. "She has," Magnus corrected. "And I cannot fire her, not yet. She has the board wrapped around her finger. My investors love her. If I fire her without irrefutable proof of negligence or fraud, the stock will tank. I need a smoking gun. I need someone to find the cracks in the foundation before the concrete is poured." He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a contractor's ID badge. It had my photo on it, a photo taken from a security camera, likely from outside my apartment. The name on the badge read, "Eleanor Vance, Independent Technical Auditor." "I am offering you a job," Magnus said. "Not as a library assistant, not as a shadow. I want you to come into the project, officially. You are an external consultant hired by the insurance underwriters to audit the engineering specs. You will report only to me." I stared at the badge. "Bella will never allow it. She hates me. She'll have me thrown out." "She can't," Magnus said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Because the insurance company is threatening to pull their coverage if I don't allow an independent audit. I made sure of that this morning. Bella has no choice. She has to work with you. She has to give you access to everything, every file, every email, every receipt." He held the badge out to me. "I want you to tear her work apart, Nora. I want you to find every mistake, every stolen dollar, every cut corner. I want you to build the case that destroys her, brick by brick." I looked at the badge, then at the skyline of Chicago stretching out behind him. This was my city. These were my buildings, even if my name wasn't on them. And Bella was about to turn the crown jewel of the city into a tomb. I thought about the night before, the way my father had gripped my shoulder, the way Bella had introduced me as a failure, the way they had erased me for 32 years. I took the badge. The plastic was cool against my palm. "I'm expensive," I said, my voice steady. Magnus's smile widened. "Just a fraction. I will pay you triple whatever you think you are worth. And when this is over, Nora, everyone will know who the real architect is." "I don't care about the fame," I said, clipping the badge onto my coat. "I just want to make sure the building doesn't fall down." "Good," Magnus said. "Then we are in agreement." He checked his watch, a platinum piece that probably cost more than my parents' house. "The project meeting starts in 45 minutes. Your sister is expecting a promotion. I think it is time we introduced her to her new auditor instead." I looked at the steel skeleton around us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just fixing the cracks, I was the sledgehammer. "Let's go," I said. "I have some numbers to check." The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Sterling Corporation headquarters took exactly 45 seconds. I counted every single one of them. My heart was beating a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a trapped bird, but my face remained a mask of cool, professional detachment. I was wearing a charcoal suit Magnus had provided, tailored so sharply it felt like armor. My hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out straight and sleek. I did not look like the library assistant who shelved romance novels for minimum wage. I looked like Eleanor Vance, the ruthless technical auditor from a consultancy firm that didn't exist until 3 hours ago. When the doors slid open, the hum of the office hit me. It was the sound of money moving at the speed of light. Magnus Sterling stepped out first, his presence parting the sea of cubicles like a biblical command. I followed 2 steps behind him, clutching a leather briefcase that contained nothing but a laptop and my sheer will to survive. We marched straight toward the corner office. Glass walls, panoramic views of Lake Michigan, and sitting behind a desk that cost more than my entire college tuition was Bella. She was on the phone, laughing at something, twirling a strand of her blonde hair. When she saw Magnus, she jumped up, smoothing her skirt, her smile bright and practiced. But when her eyes landed on me, the smile didn't just fade, it curdled. "Nora," she asked, her voice cracking, "what are you doing here? Did you get lost trying to find the service entrance?" Magnus didn't let me answer. "Ms. Kingswell, this is Eleanor Vance. She is the senior auditor from Vector Consulting." Bella blinked, her brain misfiring. "Vector, I don't know them. And why is she dressed like that, Magnus? This is my sister. She works at a library. This is some kind of joke, right?" "The insurance underwriters for Skyline Rebirth do not make jokes, Bella," Magnus said. His voice was calm, but it had the weight of an anvil. "They have flagged the project for a mandatory independent review due to the complexity of the structural changes you proposed last month. Ms. Vance is here to verify the data. If she does not sign off, the insurance is pulled. If the insurance is pulled, the construction stops." Bella's face went from confused to pale, and then to a shade of red that clashed with her blouse. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. She knew I knew. She knew that I was the one who had done her calculus homework since the 10th grade. She knew I was the one who understood why a cantilever beam worked and she did not. "But she's not an auditor," Bella stammered, trying to regain her footing. "She's incompetent. She can barely hold down a job. You can't let her touch my files. She'll ruin everything." "Her credentials have been vetted by the board," Magnus lied smoothly. "She has full clearance. You will set her up with a workstation immediately. And Bella, if I hear that you have obstructed her work in any way, I will consider it a breach of your fiduciary duty." Magnus turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the lion's den. The silence that stretched between us was thick enough to choke on. Bella walked around her desk, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. She stopped inches from my face. I could smell her expensive perfume, a scent that I had always associated with being told I wasn't good enough. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing," she hissed, her voice low and venomous, "but you are going to regret this. You think because you put on a suit, you are one of us. You are nothing. You are a parasite." "I need a desk, Bella," I said, my voice steady. "And access to the central server," she sneered. "Fine. You want a desk? Follow me." She didn't lead me to one of the empty, sun-drenched offices down the hall. She marched me past the design team, who all stopped to stare, and toward the back of the floor. Near the restrooms, she opened a door to a windowless room that was clearly used for storage. It was filled with boxes of printer paper and old toner cartridges. There was a small, scratched metal desk in the corner. "Here is your office, Ms. Vance," she mocked. "Don't get comfortable. You won't be here long enough to unpack." She slammed the door, plunging me into semi-darkness. I didn't care. I sat down, opened my laptop, and connected to the network. Magnus had given me administrative override codes. I didn't need Bella's permission to see the truth. I just needed a connection. I had been working for 20 minutes when my personal phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I looked. "Mother," I answered. "Have you lost your mind?" Her scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Bella just called me in tears. She says you are at her office pretending to be some kind of boss. How dare you? Nora, how dare you try to humiliate your sister at her own workplace?" "I'm working. Mom," I said, typing a command line into the terminal. "Working, you are interfering." My father's voice joined in from the background. "We finally get Bella to the top, and you show up like a bad omen to drag her down. Do you have any idea how hard we have worked for this reputation? Get out of there immediately. Tell Mr. Sterling you are sick. Tell him you are incompetent. I don't care what you say. Just leave." "I can't do that," I said. "I have a job to do." "You have no job," my mother shrieked. "You are a library assistant. That is your job. That is all you are capable of. If you ruin this for Bella, Nora, I swear to God, do not bother coming home for Christmas. Do not bother coming home ever." My hand hovered over the end call button. The words stung. They always stung, like salt rubbed into an open wound. But this time, the pain was different. It wasn't the dull ache of rejection. It was the sharp clarity of realization. They were not protecting their daughter. They were protecting their investment. I was just a liability on their balance sheet. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, and hung up. I turned off the phone and threw it into my bag. I focused on the screen. It was time to hunt. I started with the material procurement logs. Bella was lazy with her digital footprint. She used the same password for her email as she did for the procurement database her birthday. It took me less than 30 seconds to get in. What I found made my stomach turn. The original specs for the Skyline Rebirth Tower, the ones I had secretly designed and submitted through the anonymous channel years ago, called for grade 60 rebar in the core columns and high-performance concrete with a compressive strength of 10,000 pounds per square inch. The invoices Bella had approved told a different story. She had authorized a switch to grade 40 rebar. It was cheaper, softer, and completely inadequate for a building of this height in a wind-heavy city like Chicago. Worse, the concrete orders were coming from a supplier I had never heard of, Apex Aggregate Supply. I ran a quick search on the company. Their registered address was a vacant lot in an industrial park 3 towns over. It was a shell company, a fake entity designed to launder money. I pulled up the financial transfers, every month, for the last 6 months. Bella had signed off on payments to Apex Aggregate totaling over $200,000. The money wasn't going into the building. It was going into a black hole, and the building was being filled with substandard slurry that would crumble under stress. "She's not just incompetent," I whispered to the empty room. "She's a thief." A knock on the door made me jump. I minimized the windows instantly. The door opened a crack, and a man's face appeared. It was Marcus, one of the senior draftsmen. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a permanent slouch, as if he carried the weight of the building on his shoulders. I remembered him from the company picnics I'd been forced to attend years ago. He was one of the few people who had ever been nice to me. "Ms. Vance," he whispered, looking over his shoulder. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He slipped inside and closed the door softly. "I heard there was an auditor," he said, wringing his hands. "I just wanted to warn you." "Warn me about what, Marcus?" "The last one," he said, his voice barely audible. 6 months ago, a man named David, he started asking questions about the concrete suppliers. He was very thorough, like you. What happened to him?" "He was fired for sexual harassment," Marcus said, his eyes wide. "Except he didn't do it. We all knew he didn't do it. Ms. Kingswell said she found inappropriate emails on his server. He lost his license. He lost everything. And before him, there was a woman who started looking into the steel orders. She had a car accident 2 days after she requested the original invoices. Brake failure. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I see the way you look at the prints," Marcus said. "You look at them like you care if the building stands up. Bella looks at them like they are checks to be cashed. Be careful. She is not alone. There are other people involved. Powerful people who want this project to finish under budget. No matter what." He placed a small, crumpled piece of paper on my desk. "Check the delivery manifests for last Tuesday. Truck number 402. It never arrived at the site, but we paid for it." Before I could thank him, he was gone. I spent the next 3 hours digging deeper. I found the manifest for truck 402. Marcus was right. It was billed as delivering 20 tons of structural steel beams. But the GPS log from the site security showed no truck entering the gate at that time. It was a phantom delivery. Bella was billing the company for materials that didn't exist, pocketing the cash, and building the tower with air and lies. I compiled everything into a folder named Project Icarus. I had enough to bury her. I had enough to send her to prison for 20 years. But I needed to present it. At 2:00 in the afternoon, my internal chat blinked. A message from Bella. Preliminary review meeting. Conference room B. Now, bring your findings. This was it. I took a deep breath, grabbed my laptop, and headed for the door. I felt a surge of confidence. I had the truth on my side. Conference room B was a glass fishbowl in the center of the office. The entire executive team was there, along with Bella and Magnus. Bella sat at the head of the table, looking uncharacteristically calm. "Ah, Ms. Vance," Bella said as I walked in. "So glad you could join us. We were just discussing the load-bearing efficiency of the lower atrium." I sat down, plugging my laptop into the projector cable. "I have some concerns about the materials, Ms. Kingswell, specifically regarding the concrete density and the rebar grade." "Is that so?" Bella smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "Well, by all means, show us your data." I opened the Project Icarus folder. I clicked on the spreadsheet comparing the invoices to the specs. The file opened. It was empty. My heart stopped. I clicked on the next file, the scanned invoices from Apex Aggregate. Empty. I clicked on the GPS logs. Empty. Every single file in the folder was 0 bytes. The data was gone. "Is there a problem?" Bella asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. The files," I stammered, my hands flying across the keyboard, trying to find a backup. "They were here. I just compiled them." Bella stood up, sighing theatrically. She turned to Magnus and the other executives. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. I gave Ms. Vance access to our secure server, and look what happened. She has corrupted the files. I received a notification 10 minutes ago that a mass delete command was executed from her terminal. That's a lie." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I didn't delete anything. Someone wiped my drive remotely." "Or," Bella said, walking over to the screen and pointing at the blank projection, "you don't actually know how to use our system. You are an external consultant, right? Maybe our software is too advanced for you, or maybe there were no findings, and you are just wasting our time to justify your hourly rate." She looked at Magnus. "Sir," I cannot work like this. She is deleting critical project data. This is sabotage. I suggest we revoke her access before she deletes the blueprints next. The room turned to look at me. The executives looked annoyed. Magnus looked unreadable, his face a stone wall. He couldn't step in to save me without blowing my cover. If he defended me now, it would look like favoritism. He had to play the impartial CEO. "Ms. Vance," Magnus said, his voice cool. "Do you have the data or not?" "I had it," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "It was right here. She wiped it." "Accusations require proof," Bella said, crossing her arms. "And right now, the only proof we have is that you are incompetent." She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with victory. "Maybe you should go back to your storage office and try to recover what you destroyed, if you can." I looked at her. I saw the triumph in her eyes. She hadn't just deleted the files. She had been watching me the whole time. She had let me dig, let me feel like I was winning, just so she could pull the rug out from under me in front of everyone. I unplugged my laptop. I didn't say another word. I walked out of the conference room, feeling the eyes of the entire company burning into my back. I went back to the storage closet and sat in the dark. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. She thought she had won. She thought she had embarrassed me. She thought I was the same little sister she used to bully into doing her homework. I opened my laptop again. I didn't try to recover the files. I opened the command terminal. She had wiped the folder on my desktop. But she forgot one thing. I wasn't just an architect. I was a ghost. And ghosts didn't just haunt houses. They haunted systems. I typed in a new command string. I wasn't going to look for the files on my computer anymore. I was going to look for the keystroke log on hers. "You want a war, Bella," I whispered to the glowing screen. "Okay, let's have a war." The glow of the monitor was the only light in the storage closet, painting my face in spectral shades of blue and white. My hands did not shake. The rage that had nearly consumed me in the conference room had distilled into something colder, sharper, and infinitely more useful. Bella believed that dragging a file to the trash bin and clicking empty was the digital equivalent of burning a document. She thought the data was gone. She was wrong. In the world of data forensics, nothing is ever truly gone until the drive itself is pulverized into dust. When a file is deleted, the computer simply removes the reference to it in the master table, marking the space as available for new data. But the ghosts of the old data remain, lingering in the magnetic sectors until they are overwritten. I opened a command line interface. Bypassing the flashy, user-friendly operating system that Bella relied on, I initiated a sector-by-sector scan of the shared drive, targeting the shadow volume copies created automatically by the server every hour. It took 12 minutes. At 2:45 in the afternoon, the Project Icarus folder reappeared on my desktop. I didn't just restore it. I duplicated it to 3 separate encrypted cloud servers and a physical drive hidden in the heel of my boot. Then, I began to read what Bella had been so desperate to hide. The concrete fraud I had suspected earlier was just the tip of the iceberg. The real horror lay in the steel. According to the change orders Bella had authorized 3 weeks ago, the structural columns for the 80th floor down to the 60th floor were no longer being sourced from U.S. Steel in Pennsylvania. They were coming from a subsidiary of Apex Aggregate, the same shell company, importing metal from a deregulated foundry overseas. I pulled up the specifications. The original design called for a 992 high-strength structural steel. Bella's order was for a 36. My breath caught in my throat. A 36 steel is fine for a 2-story warehouse or a pedestrian walkway. It is not fine for the upper third of a skyscraper in the Windy City. It lacked the yield strength to withstand the lateral torsion caused by high-altitude gusts. The cost difference was nearly 40%. Bella was saving the company millions of dollars on paper, likely pocketing a massive kickback, but she was turning the top of the Skyline Rebirth into a tuning fork that would snap at the first sign of a blizzard. I needed more than a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet could be argued away as a clerical error or a placeholder. I needed the metal itself. I waited until the sun set. The office emptied out. The executives leaving for their cocktail hours and the cleaners moving in with their vacuums. I packed my laptop and walked out the service exit, blending into the night. The construction site for Skyline Rebirth was 3 miles south. A looming skeletal giant against the dark sky. The cranes at the top looked like dormant praying mantises. The site was surrounded by 12-foot chain-link fences, topped with razor wire, and security patrols were frequent. I parked my beat-up sedan 2 blocks away in the shadow of an underpass. I changed into dark cargo pants and a black hoodie, pulling my hair back tightly. I wasn't the library assistant tonight. I was the auditor. I approached the perimeter on the east side, near the river, where the ground was muddy and the lighting was poor. I found a section of the fence where the soil had eroded, leaving a gap just large enough for a determined person to slide under. I dragged myself through the mud, the cold seeping into my clothes, and emerged inside the zone. The site was a graveyard of heavy machinery. Silent bulldozers and excavators sat like sleeping beasts. I moved in a crouch, staying in the shadows of the material stacks. I needed to get to the staging area where the new steel beams were being stored before they were hoisted up the next morning. I spotted the pile near the base of the tower crane. The beams were massive, dark shapes in the gloom. I crept forward, pulling a small, diamond-tipped sampling tool and a high-resolution camera from my pocket. I reached the nearest beam. I needed a shaving, just a few grams of metal to run a spectrographic analysis. I pressed the tool against the flange of the beam and began to scrape. It was slow work, silent but arduous. Snap. The sound of a twig breaking behind me was as loud as a gunshot. I froze, killing the small flashlight I held in my teeth. "You are not supposed to be here," a voice grumbled. It wasn't the professional challenge of a licensed security guard. It was rough, slurred, and dangerous. I turned slowly. A man stepped out from behind a stack of plywood. He was wearing a security uniform, but it was unbuttoned at the collar, and he held a heavy flashlight like a club. He didn't have a radio. I said, "You are not supposed to be here," he repeated, slapping the flashlight into his open palm. "Ms. Kingswell said someone might come snooping. Said I should make sure they don't come back." My stomach dropped. Bella had anticipated this. She hadn't just deleted the files. She had placed a guard dog on the bone. "I am an auditor," I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "I have authorization to be on this site." "I don't see no badge," the man sneered. He took a step closer. He was big, smelling of stale beer and violence. "All I see is a trespasser, and accidents happen on construction sites all the time. People fall into holes. People get hit by falling debris." He lunged. I scrambled backward, slipping on the wet mud. He was fast for a big man. He raised the heavy flashlight, aiming for my head. I braced myself for the impact, raising my arms to shield my face. The blow never came. There was a dull thud, the sound of meat hitting meat, and a choked gasp. I lowered my arms. The guard was on the ground, unconscious. Standing over him was a shadow. The figure stepped into the sliver of moonlight. It was the driver, Magnus Sterling's driver. The mountain of a man who had picked me up that morning. He adjusted his cuffs, looking at the unconscious guard with mild disinterest. "Mr. Sterling prefers his auditors in one piece," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You were following me?" I asked, pulling myself up from the mud. "Mr. Sterling protects his investments," he corrected. He reached down, grabbed a loose piece of scrap metal from the beam I had been scraping, and handed it to me. It was a jagged cutoff, perfect for testing. "Take it. The lab on West Jackson is expecting you. They will run the test immediately." He turned and dragged the unconscious guard into the shadows. "Go. You have a dinner to attend." I didn't ask questions. I took the jagged piece of steel, cold and heavy in my hand, and ran. 3 hours later, the verdict was in. The mass spectrometer didn't lie. The carbon content was too high, the manganese too low, the steel was brittle. It was scrap metal melted down and reshaped, to look like structural support. If a 60-mile-per-hour wind hit the tower, a common occurrence in Chicago, the welds would hold, but the beams themselves would shatter like glass. I had the proof, I had the weapon, but the day wasn't over. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't be late, and wear something decent for once. Bella is celebrating." I stared at the screen. I wanted to go home, wash the mud off my skin, and sleep for a week. But I couldn't. The game required me to play the part of the beaten dog one last time. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. It was a large colonial-style house that looked perfect from the street-manicured lawn. White pillars, warm light spilling from the windows. Inside, it was a museum of Bella's achievements. Trophies on the mantel, framed diplomas on the wall, photos of Bella shaking hands with the mayor. There were no photos of me. I walked in, wearing a clean but old dress I kept in my trunk. The smell of roast beef and expensive red wine filled the air. "There she is," my father boomed from the head of the table. He was already tipsy, his face flushed. "The prodigal daughter returns from her little adventure." Bella was sitting at the center of the table, holding court. She wore a red silk dress that looked like it cost more than my car. She looked at me with a smirk, her eyes glinting with malice. She thought she had won. She thought I had given up after the conference room fiasco. "You look tired, Nora," Bella cooed. "Hard day at the library. Or did you finally realize that the corporate world is a bit too fast for you?" "I'm fine," I said quietly, taking the empty seat at the far end of the table. "Fine, she's better than fine," my mother chirped, pouring more wine. "Bella, tell Nora about the surprise." Bella took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. "Well, since I am practically the vice president of Sterling Corp already, Magnus is just finalizing the paperwork. I decided to treat myself. I bought the new Porsche Cayenne Turbo, cash." My father whistled. "Cash, that is my girl. Success looks good on you, honey." "It's beautiful," Bella continued, examining her manicure. "Leather interior, panoramic roof. I parked it out front. You probably saw it next to your whatever that thing is you drive. Where did you get that kind of cash?" "Bella?" I asked. My voice was low, cutting through the celebration. "The bonus structure at Sterling doesn't pay out until the end of the fiscal year." The table went quiet for a second. Bella's eyes narrowed. "I got a signing bonus," she lied smoothly. "Magnus insisted. He knows my value. Unlike some people, I don't work for minimum wage." "It's a lot of money for a signing bonus," I pressed, "especially when the project is over budget." "Nora," my mother slammed her hand on the table. "Stop being jealous. It is ugly. Just because your sister is successful and you are stuck does not mean you get to interrogate her. You should be happy for her. She is paying off the mortgage on this house next month. What have you ever contributed?" "I'm just curious about the math," I said, staring directly at Bella. "The numbers have to add up." Bella laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Oh, grow up. Nora, the real world isn't about math. It's about leverage. It's about knowing how to move things around until they fit." She leaned forward, her voice dropping, thinking she was speaking to a defeated idiot. "Sometimes you have to fudge the numbers to get the result you want. It's called creative accounting. Everyone does it. That is why I'm driving a Porsche and you are driving a rust bucket. I know how to play the game." "Fudging the numbers," I repeated, "like the materials." "Who cares about the materials?" Bella waved her hand dismissively, the wine sloshing in her glass. "Steel is steel. Concrete is concrete. As long as it looks good on the ribbon-cutting day, nobody cares. You think Magnus became a billionaire by following every little rule? I am just doing what needs to be done to maximize the profit. That is what leaders do." My hand was under the table, resting in the pocket of my cardigan. My thumb was pressed firmly against the record button of my phone. "You're right, Bella," I said, forcing a tight smile. "You are a true leader." "Damn right I am," she said, raising her glass. "To the future vice president." "To the future," I echoed. my other hand clutching the jagged piece of scrap steel in my pocket. My parents clinked their glasses against hers, beaming with pride at the daughter who was building their retirement on a foundation of lies. I sat in silence, listening to the recording save on my phone. She had just confessed. She thought she was bragging to a nobody. She didn't know she had just handed the nobody the final nail for her coffin. The dinner continued, a blur of self-congratulation and insults directed at me. I ate the cold roast beef, swallowing it along with my anger. "Enjoy the Porsche, Bella," I thought as I watched her laugh. "It will be the last thing you ever own." The recording on my phone felt heavier than a brick in my pocket. It was not just data. It was a confession. It was the sound of my sister, Bella, laughing about fraud while sipping a vintage Cabernet that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The next morning, the sky over Chicago was the color of a fresh bruise. I arrived at the Sterling Corporation early, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and resolve. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the recording over and over again. Every time Bella laughed, a little piece of my hesitation chipped away, but she was still my sister. We shared the same blood, the same childhood bedroom, the same terrifying parents. There was a small, foolish part of me that wanted to believe she didn't understand the gravity of what she was doing. Maybe she thought it was just money. Maybe she didn't realize that physics does not negotiate. I decided to give her one last chance. It was a mercy she did not deserve, but it was a mercy I needed to offer for the sake of my own conscience. I found her in the break room, standing by the espresso machine. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that looked pristine, untouched by the grime of the construction site she was destroying. "Bella," I said, closing the door behind me. She jumped, nearly spilling her coffee. When she saw it was me, or rather, Eleanor Vance, she rolled her eyes. "God, you creep. Do you have to sneak up on people? What do you want? I am busy preparing for the board meeting." "I know about the steel," I said. I kept my voice low, steady. "I know you switched the A992 beams for A36. I know about Apex aggregate." Bella froze. For a split second, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. It was a flicker, like a candle in a wind tunnel, but it was there. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a mask of arrogant dismissal. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, turning back to her coffee. "You are imagining things. You are looking at the wrong spreadsheets again. I have the samples." "Bella," I lied, or rather, I told a half-truth. I had the results, not the physical beams in my pocket. "I know the yield strength is too low. If a storm hits, the 80th floor will shear off. People will die. Not just workers, but families, residents." I took a step closer. "Fix it. Call the suppliers. Tell them there was a mix-up. Halt the construction for a safety review. If you do it now, you can frame it as a precautionary measure. You might lose your bonus, but you won't go to prison. And you won't have blood on your hands." Bella turned around slowly. She looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as pity mixed with disgust. "You really are pathetic, aren't you?" She laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. "You are so jealous of me that you have invented this entire fantasy about collapsing buildings just to make yourself feel important." "This isn't about jealousy," I pleaded, though I felt my resolve hardening into ice. "It is about physics. You cannot cheat gravity." "I am not cheating anything," Bella snapped. "I am managing a budget, something you would know nothing about since you live in a rat hole. And let me tell you something. Nora, if you breathe a word of this to Magnus or the board, do you know what I will do?" She stepped into my personal space, her eyes narrowing. "I will tell them about your breakdown," she hissed. "I will tell them about how our parents had to send you to therapy because you were delusional. I will tell them you are off your meds and you are stalking me. Who do you think they will believe, the vice president of the company or the library assistant with a history of instability?" "I don't have a history of instability," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You made that up to cover for the fact That I was doing your work. History is written by the winners. Nora. She smiled, tapping her manicured fingernail against my chest. And you? You are a loser. Now get out of my face before I call security. She brushed past me, leaving the scent of expensive vanilla and rot in her wake. I stood there for a long time. The last thread of sisterhood had just snapped. She wasn't just negligent, she was malicious. She was willing to destroy my life to protect her stolen glory. I walked out of the break room. I didn't go to my storage closet. I went to the elevator and took it down to the parking garage. A black sedan was waiting in the far corner, nestled in the shadows. The window rolled down as I approached. Magnus Sterling sat in the back seat, reading a report on a tablet. He didn't look up as I slid in beside him. "Did she take the lifeline?" he asked. "No," I said, staring straight ahead. "She tried to strangle me with it." Magnus nodded slowly. He tapped the screen of his tablet and handed it to me. "Then you need to see this." I looked at the screen. It was an internal memo, drafted by Bella, scheduled to be sent to Human Resources and the Legal Department later that afternoon. The subject line read, "Termination of employment for cause, Sarah Jenkins." I scrolled down. Sarah Jenkins was a junior structural engineer. I had seen her in the office, a quiet girl, 23 years old, fresh out of college. She wore thick glasses and always carried a notebook. She reminded me so much of myself at that age it made my heart ache. The memo accused Sarah of gross negligence and altering material specifications without authorization. Bella was blaming the steel swap on her. She was setting up a scapegoat. She was going to ruin this girl's career, destroy her reputation, and possibly send her to jail, just to cover her own tracks. "She is going to feed that girl to the wolves," Magnus said softly, "just like she fed you to your parents." I stared at the photo of Sarah attached to the file. She looked hopeful. She didn't know that her boss was currently sharpening a knife to put in her back. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a dam giving way. "I am ready," I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. It was deeper, stronger. "I want to pull the trigger." "Good," Magnus said. He took the tablet back. "You have full autonomy. Burn it down." I returned to my desk. But I was no longer working. I was hunting. For the next 6 hours. I didn't just audit. I dissected. I used the administrative access Magnus had given me to bypass every firewall Bella had lazily erected. I traced the wire transfers from Sterling Corporation to Apex Aggregate. I found the routing numbers that linked Apex to a shell account in the Cayman Islands. And then, the final piece of the puzzle, I found the transfer from the Cayman account to a private holding company registered under the name BOK Lifestyle LLC. Bella hadn't even been clever enough to change her initials. I compiled it all. The email timestamps showing Bella personally approving the A36 steel, the spectrographic analysis of the beam I had stolen, the draft of the termination letter for Sarah Jenkins, the bank records. I created a dossier that was 400 pages long. It wasn't just a report. It was a legal annihilation. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Bella must have sensed that the water was rising. Maybe she saw the network traffic. Maybe she just felt the cold draft of impending doom. My phone rang. It was my mother. I ignored it. It rang again. My father. Ignored. Then, a text from Bella. "What are you doing?" "Mom and Dad are coming over." I stared at the screen. She had called in the cavalry. She was terrified, and like a child who had broken a vase. She was crying for Mommy and Daddy to come fix it. I left the office. I needed to be on my own turf for this. I arrived at my apartment 40 minutes later. The sun had set, and the streetlights were flickering with their usual unreliability. I sat on my lumpy couch, the dossier on the coffee table in front of me, and waited. They didn't knock. They pounded. "Nora." "Open this door immediately." My father's voice boomed through the thin wood. I walked over and unlocked the deadbolt. The door flew open, and my parents stormed in. They looked out of place in my cramped hallway, my father in his cashmere coat. my mother with her pearls and her look of perpetual disappointment. "What have you done?" my mother screamed, not even waiting for me to close the door. Bella called us in hysterics. She says you are hacking her computer. She says you are planting false evidence to frame her because you are jealous of her promotion. "I am not framing anyone," I said calmly. I walked back to the couch and sat down. "I am just uncovering the truth." "The truth." My father laughed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You wouldn't know the truth if it bit you. You are a bitter, lonely girl who cannot stand to see her sister shine. We told you to stay away. We told you not to interfere. She is stealing," I said, cutting him off. "She is stealing millions of dollars, and she is building a tower that is going to collapse. She's going to kill people. Dad, does that matter to you at all?" My mother stepped forward. She looked around my apartment with a sneer, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the secondhand furniture. "Of course it matters," she said, her voice dropping to a manipulative whisper. "But Bella says it is under control. She says she can fix it. She just needs time, and she cannot fix it if you are dragging her name through the mud." She sat down next to me, reaching for my hand. Her skin was cold. "Nora, listen to me. We are a family. We protect each other. Think of everything we have done for you. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. Is this how you repay us, by destroying your sister?" "You didn't protect me," I said, pulling my hand away. "You used me. You made me do her homework. You made me draw her designs. You made me write her thesis." "Because she needed help," my mother cried. Bella is special. She has the charm. She has the look. She is the face of this family. You are the brains. Yes, we know that." The room went silent. I looked at them, really looked at them. "You know," I whispered. "Of course we know," my father scoffed, pouring himself a glass of water from my kitchen tap without asking. "We are not idiots, Nora. We know Bella can't draw a straight line to save her life. We know you did the work. We knew it when she won the Dean's Award. We knew it when she got the internship." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You knew all this time, and you let her treat me like I was stupid. You let her call me a failure." "It was necessary," my mother said, as if she were explaining why the sky is blue. "Bella is the one who can sell it. She is the one who can marry well. She is the star. You are the support system. That is your role. Nora, everyone has a role. You are the engine. She is the paint job. Nobody looks at the engine. But the car doesn't run without it. We thought you understood that." "We thought you were happy to help the family succeed," my father added. "But now you are acting like a terrorist. You are threatening the golden goose." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. They hadn't been blind. They hadn't been fooled by Bella. They were accomplices. They had knowingly, willingly sacrificed me on the altar of Bella's vanity because they preferred a pretty lie to an ugly truth. They didn't love me less because they thought I was a failure. They loved me less because I was useful. And tools are not loved. Tools are used. "So," I said, my voice trembling with the force of my realization, "you want me to stop. You want me to let her frame Sarah Jenkins. You want me to let her keep the stolen money. You want me to let the building fall down, just so Bella can keep playing dress-up." "The building won't fall," my mother said dismissively. "Bella said it's just a technicality. She will fix it later. Just delete the files. Nora, go back to the library. We will pay you. We can give you an allowance, $5,000 a month, cash. Just go away." They were trying to buy me, with the money Bella had probably stolen. I looked at the dossier on the table. I looked at my parents, these strangers who had lived in my house for 32 years. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me?" my father sputtered. "Get out," I screamed, standing up and pointing at the door. "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life." "You are making a mistake," my mother warned, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "If you do this, Nora, You are dead to us. We will cut you off completely. You can't cut off someone you never held on to, I said. They stared at me for a moment, realizing that their guilt trip had run out of gas. My father sneered, grabbed his coat, and marched out. My mother looked at me one last time, shaking her head. You were always such a difficult child, she muttered, and closed the door behind her. I stood in the silence of my apartment. I was shaking. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't shaking from fear of their disapproval. I was shaking from the adrenaline of freedom. They were gone. The illusion of a family was gone. I picked up the dossier. I picked up the phone. I dialed Magnus Sterling's number. Do you have it? He asked. I have everything, I said. And I'm not just going to fire her. Magnus, I'm going to bury them all. I'll see you in the boardroom, he said. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Bella was probably drinking champagne, thinking her parents had fixed her little problem. She thought the engine was back in the garage. She didn't know the engine had just cut the brakes. The attack came at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was executed with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was sitting in my converted storage closet, watching the data streams from the Apex aggregate accounts flow across my screen like a river of dirty money. I had spent the last 12 hours building a digital fortress, anticipating Bella's next move. I knew she was desperate. I knew my parents had failed to buy me off. And I knew that a desperate narcissist is the most dangerous creature on earth because they will burn the house down just to kill the spider on the wall. The door to my office did not just open, it was kicked in. 3 uniformed security officers stormed into the tiny room, filling the space with the smell of polyester and aggression. Behind them stood the chief of security, a man named Henderson, who had always looked at me with suspicion, and behind him, wearing a smile that could shatter glass, was Bella. Step away from the computer, Henderson barked, his hand resting on his taser. Hands where I can see them now. I slowly lifted my hands, intertwining my fingers behind my head. I did not look surprised. I did not look terrified. This infuriated Bella. Grab her, Bella shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. She is deleting the evidence. Don't let her touch the keyboard. 2 of the guards grabbed my arms, hauling me out of the chair with unnecessary force. They pinned me against the wall, my cheek pressed against the cold plaster. What is going on? I asked, my voice calm. Am I under arrest? You are under investigation for corporate espionage, Bella announced. Stepping into the room, she was holding a plastic evidence bag containing a flash drive. We found this in your bag, Nora. It contains the complete proprietary schematics for the Skyline Rebirth project, along with a drafted email to our biggest competitor offering to sell the designs for $2 million. She walked over to my desk and tapped the enter key on my laptop. A window popped up on the screen, a file transfer protocol linked to an external IP address. And look at that, she said, feigning shock. Caught in the act. You were uploading the structural data to a server in Hong Kong. We have the logs. It was a clumsy frame-up. The flash drive wasn't mine. The upload window was a script she had planted, but to the security team, it looked damning. I didn't do that, I said. Save it for the police, Bella sneered. She leaned in close, her voice a triumphant whisper. I told you, Nora, you are a failure, and now you are a criminal. Mom and Dad are going to be so disappointed when they see you in handcuffs on the evening news. Take her to the holding room, Henderson ordered. I am calling the Chicago Police Department. No, the word was not shouted, but it stopped the room cold. Magnus Sterling stood in the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, his arms crossed, looking at the scene with an expression of profound boredom. He wore a navy suit that cost more than the security team's combined annual salaries. Mr. Sterling, Bella said, rushing over to him. Thank God you are here. We caught her. My sister was stealing the designs. She was selling us out. I knew she was jealous. But I never thought she would stoop to treason. Magnus looked at Bella, then at me, pinned against the wall. Release her, Magnus said. Sir, Henderson asked, confused. She was caught actively transferring data. This is a felony. I said release her, Magnus repeated, his voice dropping an octave. I will not have the police storming my headquarters while the investors are in the building. It looks messy. The guards hesitated, then let me go. I rubbed my wrists, watching Bella's face fall. But Magnus, Bella protested, her voice rising in pitch. She is a thief. You can't just let her walk away. She tried to destroy the company. If she is a thief, we will deal with it internally, Magnus said. He walked over to my desk and closed the laptop. I am freezing all assets and all personnel access immediately. Henderson, escort Ms. Vance out of the building. She is suspended pending a full board review. Suspended? Bella gasped. She should be fired. She should be in jail. We follow protocol. Bella, Magnus said, turning his cold gray eyes on her. We will hold an emergency board of directors meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We will review the evidence. If Ms. Vance is guilty, I will personally hand her over to the FBI. Until then, get back to work. Bella stared at him. Then a slow, victorious smile spread across her face. She thought Magnus was just being bureaucratic. She thought she had won. She had planted the evidence. She had the security chief as a witness. And now she had a board meeting where she could publicly crucify me and cement her promotion. Of course. Sir, Bella said, smoothing her skirt. I will prepare the report. I am just so heartbroken that my own sister would do this. Henderson grabbed my arm again, gentler this time, and marched me toward the elevators. As the doors closed, I saw Bella pick up her phone, likely to call our parents and share the good news. I didn't say a word until I was on the sidewalk outside the Sterling building. The wind was whipping around the skyscrapers, carrying the scent of impending rain. I hailed a cab, but I didn't go home. I pulled out my tablet. I had anticipated the suspension. In fact, I had counted on it. Bella thought she was a genius for planting that script on my computer. What she didn't know was that my computer was a honeypot. The night before, at exactly 8:45 in the evening, my system had alerted me to a remote login. I hadn't blocked it. Instead, I had activated a background screen recorder and a front-facing camera capture. I opened the video file on my tablet. The screen showed a grainy black-and-white feed from my laptop's webcam. It showed an empty office. Then, the door opened. Bella walked in. She looked over her shoulder, paranoid. She sat down at my desk. She plugged in the flash drive. She typed in the command to initiate the fake upload. Then, the best part, her phone rang. She put it on speaker and set it on the desk while she typed. It is done, Julian, she said to the phone. The audio was crisp. I am planting the files now. The little rat won't know what hit her. A male voice answered. Are you sure this will work if Magnus finds out? Magnus is old and tired, Bella scoffed. He trusts me. Once Nora is out of the way, the audit stops. We can approve the final invoice for the steel, split the remaining $2 million, and disappear before the cracks start showing. Just make sure the money is clean. Bella, the man Julian said. I don't want the IRS knocking on my door. Relax, Bella laughed. I am transferring the funds to the Shell account right now. By the time they fire Nora, we will be rich. I paused the video. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Apex Aggregate, the man who was selling us the bad steel. And apparently, Bella's lover. I had the smoking gun, but I needed more. I needed to nail the coffin shut so tight that not even a crowbar could pry it open. I checked the time. It was 11:30. I needed to visit the suburbs, specifically, the wealthy enclave of Lake Forest. I did a quick search for Julian Thorne's home address. It was a sprawling estate on the lakefront, and according to the society pages, Julian was married to a woman named Elena Thorne, a philanthropist who sat on the board of the Chicago Art Institute. I took the train out to the suburbs, watching the city recede. I wasn't just an auditor anymore. I was an executioner. When I arrived at the Thorne estate, I didn't go to the front gate. I went to the service entrance. I told the housekeeper I had urgent documents from the Sterling Corporation for Mrs. Thorne regarding a charity donation. It was a gamble, but rich people rarely questioned the delivery of paperwork. Elena Thorne met me in her sunroom. She was a beautiful woman in her late 40s, but her face was etched with the tired lines of someone who had spent too many years pretending not to see things. "You are not a courier," she said, looking at my cheap suit and intense eyes. "Who are you?" "My name is Nora Kingswell," I said. "I am the sister of the woman your husband is sleeping with." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just sighed, a long, weary sound, and motioned for me to sit down. "I assume you want money to keep quiet," she said, pouring herself a glass of iced tea. "That is usually how these things go." "I don't want your money," I said. I placed my tablet on the glass table. "I want to stop them. Julian and my sister are not just having an affair. Mrs. Thorne, they are embezzling millions of dollars from the Sterling Corporation, and they are using substandard materials to build a skyscraper that is going to kill people." Elena's hand paused in midair. "Kill people." "The steel is garbage," I said bluntly. "They are splitting the difference. Bella is framing me for it. But if that building goes up, it will come down, and when it does, your husband won't just be an adulterer. He will be a mass murderer. And since your name is on the joint accounts, the government will come for you too." I tapped the screen and played the video of Bella and Julian. Elena watched the video in silence. She listened to her husband conspire to commit fraud. She listened to him talk about running away with Bella. When the video ended, Elena set her glass down. She didn't cry. She looked furious. "He told me the business was struggling," she said, her voice ice cold. "He told me he needed to liquidate my trust fund to save the company. He took $3 million from me last month." "He didn't save the company," I said. "He gave it to Bella." Elena stood up. She walked over to a vintage secretary desk in the corner of the room. She unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick leather binder. "Julian is arrogant," she said. "He thinks I am just a trophy wife who doesn't know how to read a bank statement. But I keep copies. Of everything." She handed me the binder. "These are the secondary ledgers for Apex Aggregate," she said. "He keeps them at home because he doesn't trust the office safe. It lists every bribe, every kickback, and every fake invoice for the last 5 years." I opened the binder. It was a gold mine. It had dates, amounts, and names. Bella's name was everywhere. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "This will send him to prison." "Good," Elena said. She looked at me, and I saw a reflection of my own pain in her eyes. "I would rather visit him in prison than watch him run away with your sister using my money. Burn him, Ms. Kingswell. Burn them both." I took the binder. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said, turning away. "Just make sure it hurts." I left the estate and headed back to the city. My phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from the Sterling Corporation server. Bella hadn't wasted any time. "Funds transfer alert. $5 million authorized from Project Contingency Fund to Vector Consulting Services." Vector Consulting, that was the fake name Magnus had set up for me. Bella was trying to frame me for the theft too. She was transferring the stolen money into an account she thought was mine. So when the police looked, they would find $5 million sitting there. But she didn't know that Magnus controlled that account. She had just transferred $5 million directly into the CEO's personal oversight fund. She had literally handed the evidence back to the victim. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound in the quiet train car. I arrived back at my apartment at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I spent the next 4 hours scanning the pages from Elena's binder and syncing them with the video footage and the transfer logs. At 6 o'clock, the email went out. It was sent to the entire executive board, the legal team, and the department heads. Subject: emergency board meeting. Personnel performance review. Date: tomorrow, January 28th. Time: 8 o'clock a.m. Location: executive boardroom. Agenda: review of high-level personnel misconduct and strategic restructuring. My phone buzzed again. A text from Bella. Enjoy your last night of freedom. Loser, the board meeting is set. Tomorrow, I become VP and you become a convict. Don't worry, I'll visit you in jail. Once, I looked at the text. I typed a reply, then deleted it. She didn't deserve a warning. I put on my best suit. I packed the tablet, the binder, and the flash drive into my briefcase. I looked at myself in the mirror. The failure was gone. The library assistant was dead. I was the ghost architect. And tomorrow, I was going to bring the house down. I sat by the window and watched the sun go down over Chicago. The lights of the Skyline rebirth crane blinked in the distance, a red warning in the night. Sleep well. Bella, I whispered to the glass. The fall is going to be long. The executive boardroom of the Sterling Corporation was a glass cage suspended in the sky. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows with a blinding intensity, illuminating the dust motes dancing above the mahogany table. It was a room designed to make human beings feel small, and today, it was working. 12 board members sat around the oval table. These were men and women who controlled the infrastructure of Chicago. They wore suits that cost more than my father's car, and expressions of perpetual skepticism. At the head of the table sat Magnus Sterling, looking like a statue carved from granite, and to his right sat Bella. She was glowing. She wore a white power suit, her hair coiffed into a perfect professional wave. She looked every inch the vice president she believed she was about to become. But the most jarring addition to the room was seated against the back wall. My parents, Robert and Susan Kingswell, were perched on leather guest chairs. They held hands, beaming with pride. Bella had invited them. She wanted an audience. She wanted them to witness her coronation. They spotted me standing by the door, clutching my briefcase, and their smiles faltered. My mother adjusted her pearls nervously, shooting me a look that clearly said, "Do not ruin this." "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Bella began. Standing up and smoothing her jacket, she clicked a remote, and a slide appeared on the massive screen behind her. It was a rendering of the Skyline Rebirth Tower, gleaming in the sunset. Today marks a pivotal moment in our company's history. Under my creative direction, we have not only met our aesthetic goals, but exceeded them. We are under budget by 15%, and we are ahead of schedule by 3 weeks. The board members nodded politely. They liked numbers. They liked under budget. This project, Bella continued, her voice swelling with practiced emotion, is not just a building, it is a testament to the Kingswell vision, a vision of strength, elegance, and— "Sit down, Bella," Magnus said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a guillotine blade. Bella froze mid-gesture. She blinked, confused. "Excuse me, sir, I have not finished the financial projections." "There are no projections," Magnus said. Not looking at her, he looked at me. "The floor is yours, Ms. Vance." I stepped forward. The silence in the room was absolute. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a steady, rhythmic beat that sounded like a ticking clock. I walked to the head of the table, disconnected Bella's laptop from the main terminal, and plugged in my own. "What is she doing?" Bella laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. She turned to the board, gesturing frantically at me. "I apologize for this interruption. This is my sister. She is a library assistant. She is currently having some mental health struggles, and Mr. Sterling, out of pity, gave her a temporary consulting role. Nora, please, go sit with Mom and Dad. You are embarrassing yourself." "She is not here to sit," Magnus said, leaning back in his chair. "She is here to testify." My screen flickered to life on the giant monitor. It wasn't a pretty rendering of a building. It was a raw, ugly spreadsheet filled with red text. "My name is Nora Kingswell," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "And for the last 10 years, I have been the architect behind every major project this family has claimed credit for. But I am not here to talk about design. I am here to talk about murder. A gasp rippled through the room. My mother stood up, clutching her purse. "Nora, stop this instant." "Sit down, Mrs. Kingswell," Magnus ordered. Without turning his head, a security guard stepped forward, gently pushing my mother back into her seat. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to a spectrographic analysis of a steel beam. "This is a cross-section of the structural columns currently being installed on the 80th floor of the Skyline Rebirth," I explained, slipping into the cold, clinical language of engineering. The design specifications, which I wrote, called for a 992 grade steel with a yield strength of 50,000 pounds per square inch. The material actually installed is A36, recycled scrap metal with a yield strength of less than 36,000 pounds per square inch. I pointed to the red line on the graph. This represents the wind load during a standard Chicago winter storm. As you can see, the stress exceeds the material's capacity by 40%. The moment the wind speed hits 60 miles per hour, the welds will shear. The top 20 floors will detach and fall onto Michigan Avenue. The board members were no longer polite. They were leaning forward, their faces pale. One of them, a structural engineer by trade, adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Vance, Ms. Kingswell, are you certain of these figures that grade of steel is illegal for high-rise construction?" "I pulled the sample myself from the site last night," I said. "And here's the purchase order." I clicked again. The screen showed the invoice, signed by Bella Kingswell. "Bella authorized the switch," I said. "The difference in cost was $2 million. That money did not go back into the company. It went here." I clicked again. The flowchart appeared. It showed the wire transfer from Sterling Corp. to Apex Aggregate, then to the Cayman Islands, and finally to BIK Lifestyle LLC. Bella's face had drained of all color. She looked like a ghost. "That is a lie," she stammered. "Those are fabricated documents. She is good with computers. She made it all up." "Did I make this up too?" I asked. I played the video. The room watched in silence as the grainy footage showed Bella entering my office. They heard her voice, clear and arrogant, talking to her lover. They heard her laugh about the little rat. They heard her conspire to plant the evidence. "By the time they fire Nora, we will be rich." The video ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a career dying. I turned to look at Bella. She was trembling. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "You little witch. You set me up." "I didn't set you up, Bella," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights." I turned back to the board. But fraud is not the only issue. The issue is competence. Bella Kingswell is the creative director. She claims to be the architect. So, I have a question for her. I pulled up the original blueprint, the one with N in the corner. I zoomed in on the complex truss system at the base of the tower. "Bella," I said, gesturing to the diagram, "explain to the board why we used a viscous damper system on the west elevation instead of a tuned mass damper. What is the resonant frequency of this building?" Bella stared at the screen. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't know. She didn't even know what a viscous damper was. "It is a simple question," I pressed. "If you designed it, you know the answer. What is the resonant frequency?" "It is standard," Bella stammered. "It is the standard frequency for big buildings." The engineer on the board scoffed. He threw his pen down on the table. "She has no idea," he muttered. "She doesn't know the first thing about structural dynamics." "I do," Bella shrieked. "I hired consultants I delegated. That is what managers do. Nora is just a detail-obsessed nerd who doesn't understand the big picture." "The big picture," Magnus said, speaking for the first time since the presentation began, "is that you stole $5 million from me and built a death trap." "I didn't steal it," Bella cried, tears now streaming down her face. She turned to our parents. "Mom, Dad, tell them I am a good person. Tell them Nora is lying." My parents looked horrified. They looked from the screen to Bella, and then to me. The illusion they had built for 30 years was crumbling in real time. My father looked like he was having a stroke. My mother just covered her mouth, staring at the video freeze frame of her golden child committing a felony. "It wasn't me," Bella yelled, pointing a finger at the door. "It was Julian Thorne. He made me do it. He said it was the only way to save his company. I was a victim. He manipulated me." The doors to the boardroom opened. 2 security guards walked in. Between them walked a man in handcuffs. It was Julian Thorne. He looked disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face gray with defeat. Bella gasped. "Julian!" Magnus stood up. He walked over to Julian. "Mr. Thorne has agreed to a plea deal," Magnus announced to the room. "In exchange for a recommendation of leniency regarding his own fraud charges, he has agreed to testify about the mastermind behind the Sterling embezzlement." Julian looked up. He looked at Bella. There was no love in his eyes, only self-preservation. "It was her idea," Julian said, his voice flat. "Bella came to me 6 months ago. She said she needed money to buy a house in Lake Forest. She said she knew how to skim from the material budget without anyone noticing. She threatened to cut my company out of the contract if I didn't help her." "You liar!" Bella screamed. She lunged at him, her nails aiming for his face. "You told me you loved me. You told me we were going to run away together." Security caught her before she could reach him. They held her back as she thrashed, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "He is lying," Bella sobbed, collapsing into the guard's arms. Nora, help me. Tell them I am your sister. You can't let them do this to me." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had tormented me for my entire life. The woman who had treated me like a servant. The woman who had tried to frame me for a crime she committed. "I am not your sister right now," I said softly. "I am the auditor, and the audit is complete." Magnus walked back to the head of the table. He looked down at Bella with cold indifference. "Bella Kingswell," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You are hereby terminated from your position at Sterling Corporation, effective immediately. Your stock options are revoked. Your company vehicle and assets are seized." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Furthermore, our legal team has already filed a complaint with the district attorney. You are being charged with grand larceny, corporate fraud, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The police are waiting in the lobby." My parents let out a collective wail. My mother slumped forward, burying her face in her hands. My father stared at the wall, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "No," Bella whimpered. "No, you can't. I am the face of this company. I am Bella Kingswell." "You are a liability," Magnus said. "Get her out of my sight." The guards began to drag her toward the door. She kicked and screamed, her perfect white suit now wrinkled and stained with her own tears. As she passed me, she looked into my eyes. "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you. You ruined everything." I didn't flinch. I watched her go. I watched the door close behind her, cutting off her screams. The room was silent again. The board members looked at me. There was no mockery in their eyes now. There was respect, and perhaps a little bit of fear. The engineer who had questioned Bella earlier stood up. He extended his hand to me. "That was impressive work, Ms. Kingswell," he said. "Regarding the viscous damper, what would you recommend to fix the oscillation issue on the west elevation?" I took his hand. It was firm. "We need to retrofit the bracing with a hydraulic system," I said, my mind already calculating the load. "It will cost $300,000, but it will stabilize the structure against wind speeds up to 100 miles per hour. "Do it," Magnus said. "Whatever she says. Do it." He looked at me. For the first time, there was a genuine smile on his face. It wasn't a nice smile. Magnus Sterling was not a nice man, but it was a smile of recognition. Game recognized game. "Meeting adjourned," Magnus said. I packed my laptop. My parents were still sitting in the back, shell-shocked. They didn't look at me. They were too busy mourning the death of their fantasy. I walked out of the boardroom. I felt lighter than I had in years. The ghost had finally materialized. And she was terrifying. The silence in the boardroom following Bella's departure did not last. It shattered like a dropped vase, sharp and dangerous. For a moment, the air had been sucked out of the room by the sheer magnitude of the revelation. The board members were gathering their papers, their faces grim, murmuring to each other in low, urgent tones about damage control and press releases. But in the back of the room, a different kind of storm was brewing. My mother, Susan Kingswell, stood up. She did not rush to the door to comfort her weeping daughter. She did not look at the screen that still displayed the evidence of the stolen millions or the brittle steel that could have killed thousands. She looked at me. Her face was not filled with the realization of her failure as a parent. It was not etched with the shame of having raised a criminal. Instead, it was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You monster!" The scream tore through the professional decorum of the room. It was a primal, ugly sound. My mother lunged across the space between us, her hands clawing at the air as if she wanted to physically tear the skin from my face. "You did this!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You planned this. You jealous, spiteful little witch. You orchestrated this whole charade just to humiliate us." My father, Robert, was right behind her. His face was a terrifying shade of purple, the veins in his neck bulging against his collar. He looked like a man on the verge of a stroke, but his rage gave him a terrifying vitality. "Traitor!" he roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany table so hard the water glasses rattled. "You betrayed your own blood. You killed her. You killed your sister just to watch her bleed." I stood my ground near the head of the table. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I had spent 32 years flinching, and I was done. "I didn't make her steal." "Dad," I said, my voice cutting through their noise like a scalpel. "I didn't make her buy scrap metal. I didn't make her frame an innocent girl. She did that all on her own." "She didn't know," my mother sobbed, grabbing the lapels of my jacket and shaking me with surprising strength. Her eyes were wild, swimming in tears that were not for the victims of the potential collapse, but for the collapse of her own social standing. "She is an artist. She doesn't understand these numbers. You know that. You know she isn't like you." "She committed fraud." "Mom," I said, trying to pry her hands off me. "Because you weren't there to help her," she screamed, slapping my chest. "You should have fixed it. You should have protected her. That is what you are for. That is your only purpose in this family, to make sure Bella shines. And instead, you broke her. You broke our beautiful girl." There it was, the naked, ugly truth, spoken out loud in a room full of strangers. That is what you are for. To clean up the mess, to hide the bodies, to be the shadow that makes the light look brighter. They didn't care about the crime. They didn't care about the morality. They only cared that I had stopped playing my assigned role as the doormat. "I am not a utility," I said, shoving my mother back. She stumbled, caught by my father, looking at me with shock as if the toaster had just spoken back to her. "I am a human being, and I am done being the foundation for a temple built to a false god." Before they could scream again, the double doors of the boardroom burst open. The security guards who had dragged Bella out were back. But they weren't alone. Behind them marched 4 officers wearing blue windbreakers with FBI, Economic Crimes Division, emblazoned on the back in yellow letters. Magnus Sterling had not just called the police, he had called the feds, in the hallway, visible through the open doors. Bella was huddled on a bench, still weeping. When she saw the agents, she stood up, her eyes widening in terror. "No," she whimpered. "No, no, no." The lead agent, a woman with a face like carved flint, approached Bella. She didn't offer a polite greeting. She pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. "Isabella Kingswell," the agent said. her voice carrying into the boardroom. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and gross negligence resulting in public endangerment." "No," Bella screamed, scrambling backward. She knocked over a decorative plant, the ceramic pot shattering on the floor. "You can't touch me. Do you know who I am? My father knows the mayor. My mother is on the library board. You can't do this to me." "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the agent ordered, unmoved by the tantrum. "Mommy," Bella wailed, spotting our parents in the doorway. "Mommy, make them stop. I don't want to go. I can't go to prison. The uniforms are ugly. I can't eat the food. Tell them, Daddy. Tell them I'm Bella." It was pathetic. It was grotesque. The woman who had sneered at me about survival of the fittest and creative accounting was now reduced to a toddler throwing a fit because she didn't want a timeout. My parents rushed into the hallway, their arms outstretched. "Stop!" my father bellowed at the federal agents. "This is a mistake. Our daughter is a victim. She was manipulated by a man. She is innocent." "Step back, sir," one of the agents warned, placing a hand on his holster, "or you will be joining her for obstruction of justice." The threat froze my father in his tracks. He watched, helpless, as the lead agent grabbed Bella's wrists. Click, click. The sound of the ratcheting metal was louder than her screaming. It was the sound of reality clamping down on a lifetime of fantasy. It was the sound of the consequences finally catching up to the golden child. They dragged her toward the elevators. She was kicking, her expensive designer heels scraping uselessly across the floor, leaving black scuff marks on the pristine marble she had once claimed to own. "Nora!" Bella screamed, seeing me standing in the boardroom doorway. "Nora, tell them you lied. Please, I'll give you the Porsche. I'll give you anything. Just tell them you made it up." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had tried to frame me for treason 12 hours ago. "I can't lie anymore, Bella," I said, my voice flat. "The numbers don't lie." The elevator doors closed, cutting off her wails. My parents turned on me again. They were trembling, their faces wet with tears and snot. "Are you happy now?" my mother hissed, her voice venomous. "You have destroyed this family. You have destroyed everything we worked for. I hope you rot in hell. Nora, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead." "I have been dead to you for 30 years, I said. "I just finally decided to have a funeral." I walked past them. I walked out of the boardroom, down the hall, and took the stairs to the lobby. I needed air. I needed to breathe something that didn't smell of betrayal and expensive cologne. The scene in the lobby was a chaotic symphony of flashbulbs and shouting. The news had leaked. Magnus didn't do things by halves. If he was going to clean house, he was going to make sure the world knew he was the one holding the broom. He had released a press statement the moment the board meeting began. Reporters were swarming the glass revolving doors like ants on a dropped candy bar. Satellite trucks were parked 3 deep on the street. My parents had managed to get downstairs ahead of me, taking the elevator. They were currently standing in front of a bank of microphones, trying to spin the narrative. "Our daughter is a victim," my father was shouting, sweating profusely under the television lights. "She was set up by a jealous sibling. This is a conspiracy to defame the Kingswell name." "Bella is an artist," my mother cried to a reporter from Channel 5. "She is a visionary. She would never hurt anyone. This is a misunderstanding. The steal was an aesthetic choice." "An aesthetic choice?" the reporter asked, looking at my mother like she was insane. "Mrs. Kingswell, the FBI just released a report stating the building was 40% structurally compromised. Are you saying your daughter thought collapse was a design feature?" "No, I mean," my mother floundered, realizing too late that the court of public opinion had already adjourned, and the verdict was guilty. Someone in the crowd shouted, "What about the money? Did she steal the $5 million for aesthetics too?" My parents looked around, trapped. They were playing the victim card, but the deck was missing. The crowd wasn't sympathetic. They were angry. They were the people who walked under that building every day. They were the people whose lives Bella had gambled with for a new car. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the circus. News alerts were popping up on the giant ticker screen in the lobby. Breaking Sterling, VP, arrested in massive fraud scheme. Apex aggregate stock plummets 90% after FBI raid. The ghost architect whistleblower exposes skyline scandal. I watched my parents shrinking under the glare of the cameras. They looked small. They looked old. They looked like two people who had bet their entire lives on a lie and lost. A shadow fell over me. Magnus Sterling stepped up beside me. He was holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed me one. It was 25-year-old Scotch. "Asset forfeiture has already begun," he said calmly, looking down at the mob. "The Porsche is being towed as we speak. The condo in the Gold Coast is frozen. The wardrobe, the jewelry, the offshore accounts, it is all gone. The government is very efficient when they smell money." "And the steel?" I asked, taking a sip. The alcohol burned pleasantly in my chest. "We are tearing down the top 20 floors starting tomorrow," Magnus said. He sounded almost cheerful about it. "It will cost $50 million to deconstruct and rebuild with the proper materials. The shareholders are screaming. The stock is down 8 points. I can fix the design," I said automatically. "If you use a composite truss system for the rebuild, you can save $10 million on the materials without sacrificing safety. I can have the drawings ready by Monday." Magnus turned to me. He looked at me with that same predatory, approving gaze he had used in the boardroom. "I know you can," he said. "That is why I fired the current technical director this morning." I blinked. "You fired Jenkins." "He was incompetent," Magnus shrugged. "He let your sister bully him into signing off on illegal materials. He didn't have the backbone to say no. I don't pay people to be yes men. I pay them to keep my buildings standing." He swirled his drink. "The position is open. Nora, technical director of the Sterling Corporation. It comes with a corner office, not a storage closet, a full support staff, full autonomy on all engineering decisions, and a base salary of $450,000 a year, plus stock options." I looked at him. "That is double what you paid him." "You are worth triple," Magnus said. "And you know it." He looked down at my parents, who were now trying to push their way through the crowd to get to their car, jeered by the onlookers. "You saved this company today," Magnus said quietly. "You saved my legacy, and you saved thousands of lives. I don't care about your last name. I care about your brain." I looked at the chaos outside. I looked at the police car flashing its lights as it carried my sister away. I looked at the parents who had disowned me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for their approval. I wasn't looking for a place to hide. "I'll take the job," I said. "On one condition." "Name it," Magnus said. "I want my name on the building," I said. "The plaque in the lobby, the press releases, the blueprints, I want it all to say Nora Kingswell. Not Vector, not Ghost, me." Magnus smiled. It was a genuine smile. "Done," he said. "Welcome to the skyline, Ms. Kingswell." I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby smelled of expensive scotch and victory. "Thank you, Magnus," I said. "Don't thank me," he replied, turning to walk back to the elevators. "Get to work. You have 20 floors to redesign." "I'm on it," I said, and as I walked toward the elevators, leaving the wreckage of my family behind me, I didn't look back, not once. The week after the board meeting was a blur of lawyers, press conferences, and the unfamiliar sensation of being respected. I sat in my new office on the 45th floor, surrounded by glass and chrome. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, a sprawling expanse of gray water meeting a gray sky. I was the technical director of Sterling Corporation now. My salary was astronomical. My authority was absolute. But the silence in my apartment at night was louder than ever. I had cut the cancer out of my life. Bella was in federal custody, denied bail due to flight risk. My parents were facing their own legal battles as the government seized their assets to pay for the deconstruction of the faulty tower. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow ache, I thought I had uncovered every lie my family had ever told. I was wrong. On a rainy Tuesday evening, my intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ms. Kingswell, there is a woman here to see you. Mrs. Clara Evans. She says she is your aunt." I froze. Aunt Clara. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. She was my mother's distant cousin, a quiet, bird-like woman who smelled of lavender and old paper. She was the only person in my extended family who had ever sent me a birthday card without a passive-aggressive note attached. She lived in a small cottage in Wisconsin, far away from the toxic orbit of the Kingswell ambition. "Send her up," I said, when I opened the door. Clara looked soaked. Her coat was worn at the elbows, and her gray hair was plastered to her forehead. She clutched a heavy plastic-wrapped box to her chest, as if it were a shield. "Nora," she breathed, her eyes wide and fearful. "I saw the news. About Bella. About the building." "Come in, Aunt Clara," I said gently, taking her wet coat. "I can make some tea." "No tea," she said, her voice trembling. She walked into my living room but didn't sit down. She placed the box on my coffee table. It was an old metal lockbox, rusted at the corners. "I cannot stay long. If your mother knew I was here, she would kill me. But after what I saw on the television, after I saw them blaming you, I couldn't keep it anymore. I made a promise to your grandmother. But God help me. Silence is a sin when it protects monsters." "Grandmother?" I asked, frowning. "My grandmother, Eleanor, who I was named after, had died when I was 12. My parents always told me she died broke and senile." "Your grandmother was not senile, Nora," Clara said, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp strength. "And she was certainly not broke. She was the smartest woman I ever knew, and she saw you. She really saw you." Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a small key on a ribbon. She handed it to me. "Open it." My hands shook slightly as I fit the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was no money. There were papers, yellowed, brittle legal documents dating back 20 years, and on top, a letter in handwriting I recognized instantly. It was jagged and sharp, the handwriting of a woman who drew architectural plans for fun in her garden. "To the grandchild who builds," the envelope read. I opened the letter first. "My dearest Nora, I know your parents. I know they look at you and see a shadow, and they look at Bella and see a mirror. They are vain, shallow people, and I fear they will try to crush the light I see in you. I have watched you stack your blocks. I have watched you draw bridges in the mud while your sister plays dress-up. You have the gift, little one. You are the architect, and I will not let them starve your talent to feed their vanity. I have left everything to you. Not to Robert, not to Susan, to you. But I have locked it in a trust that triggers only when you turn 18, provided you pursue your craft. Build something beautiful for me. Love, Grandma." Tears pricked my eyes. I wiped them away impatiently. "She left me a trust, but Mom said she died in debt. They said they had to pay for her funeral." "Read the will," Clara whispered. She pointed to the thick legal document beneath the letter. "Read the clause on page 4. I turned the pages. The legalese was dense, but the numbers jumped out at me. "The estate of Eleanor Vance, valued at $12 million, is to be held in the Vance Generational Trust. $12 million. In 2006, I gasped. 12 million. Where is it?" "Keep reading," Clara said. "The beneficiary clause." I looked down. "The sole beneficiary of this trust shall be the grandchild who demonstrates an aptitude for architecture and design, as verified by acceptance into an accredited university program. The funds are to be used for education, housing, and the advancement of their career." "I got into the architecture program," I said, my voice rising. "I got a full ride because we couldn't afford tuition. Mom said there was no money." "There was money," Clara said, her face twisting with disgust. But look at the addendum attached to the back. Look at the date. I flipped to the back. There was a document dated 1 month after my grandmother's funeral. It was a petition to modify beneficiary based on mental incapacity. It stated that Nora Kingswell, me, at 12 years old, had been diagnosed with severe cognitive delays and an inability to manage finances. It claimed that Isabella Kingswell, my sister, was the true prodigy, the one who had drawn all the pictures in my grandmother's studio. It was signed by my parents, and it was notarized by a lawyer who I knew had been disbarred 5 years ago for fraud. "They stole it," I whispered. The room seemed to spin. "They stole my inheritance. They told the lawyers I was mentally disabled so they could transfer the trust to Bella." "They didn't just transfer it," Clara said. "They consumed it. Nora, look at your life. Look at their life. The house in the suburbs, BMWs, the summers in Europe that Bella went on while you stayed home to work at the diner. That wasn't your father's salary. Robert never made more than $60,000 a year as a salesman. They have been living like kings on your grandmother's legacy for 20 years. I sat down hard on the sofa. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with terrifying precision. The expensive private school Bella attended while I went to public school, the tutors, the clothes, the parties. My parents hadn't just favored her, they had used my money to construct her pedestal. "They spent my inheritance to make her look like a success," I said, my voice hollow. "And they kept me poor so I wouldn't have the resources to fight back." "It is worse than that," Clara said. She reached into the box and pulled out a single, thin sheet of paper. It was a bank document, a withdrawal authorization. "Your parents were greedy," Clara said, "but Bella was complicit." She handed me the paper. It was dated on Bella's 18th birthday. It was a release form for the trust's liquid assets. It required the signature of the beneficiary to acknowledge that they understood the terms of the will specifically. The clause that the money was intended for the architect of the family, at the bottom of the page, in loopy, confident cursive, was the signature Isabella Kingswell, and right next to it, a handwritten note in the margin, initialed by Bella Nora, is unaware of the trust existence. Please direct all statements to my private P.O. box to maintain family harmony. The air left my lungs. "She knew," I choked out. "She knew. She knew since the day she turned 18, Clara confirmed. She knew that every dollar she spent, every dress she bought, every tuition check for the college she barely attended, it was all yours. She knew she was spending your future." I closed my eyes, and a montage of memories played behind my eyelids, now lit by a sinister new light. I remembered the time I was 19, begging Bella for a loan to buy a new laptop for my drafting classes because mine had crashed. She had laughed at me. She had said, "Maybe if you worked harder, you could afford nice things. Nora, I can't just give you handouts. It builds character." She was sitting on a pile of my millions, lecturing me about character. I remembered the time my parents told me they couldn't afford to help me with a deposit for my first apartment. Forcing me to live in that basement storage unit for 2 years, they said, "Money is tight. Honey, we have to prioritize Bella's networking events." They weren't prioritizing her. They were laundering my money through her. Suddenly, the abuse made sense. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. If I had become successful, if I had become a recognized architect with my own money and lawyers, I might have looked into the family finances. I might have found the trust. They had to keep me down. They had to crush my confidence. They had to make me believe I was a failure, a library assistant, a nobody, because if I ever realized I was somebody, their entire lifestyle would evaporate. "They didn't hate me," I whispered, the realization cold as ice in my veins. "They feared me. Every time they called me a failure, it was because they were terrified I would succeed." "They were terrified you would ask questions," Clara said softly. "Bella bullied you not just because she was mean, but because she was guarding the vault. She needed you to be small so she could be rich." I looked at the document again. Please direct all statements to my private P.O. box. She had orchestrated the silence. My sister. The girl I had protected. The girl I had saved from academic failure 1,000 times. She had looked me in the eye for 14 years, knowing she was stealing the roof over my head, and she hadn't blinked. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked Clara. "Because the government has seized the accounts," Clara said. "But this trust was a separate legal entity. The FBI missed it because it was in your grandmother's maiden name. There is still money left, Nora. Not much, maybe $2 million out of the original 12, but it is there. And if you don't claim it, the IRS will take it to pay for Bella's fines." She reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was dry like parchment. "It belongs to you. It always belonged to you. Take it back." I stared at the box. This wasn't just about money. This was about 20 years of psychological warfare funded by my own inheritance. My parents had treated me like a parasite while they were the ones sucking my blood. A cold, dark calm settled over me. It was deeper than the rage I had felt in the boardroom. That was professional anger. This was personal. This was the severing of the soul. "Thank you, Clara," I said. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was lashing against the glass, distorting the lights of the city. "What will you do?" Clara asked, pulling her coat back on. "I am going to finish it," I said. I thought I stripped them of their dignity. I thought I stripped them of their reputation. But I realize now, that wasn't enough. I turned back to her. My face felt like stone. "They owe me a life," I said. "They owe me $12 million plus interest. They owe me every vacation, every meal, every comfortable night's sleep they enjoyed for the last 2 decades. I picked up the phone on my desk. I dialed the number of the fiercest forensic accountant in Chicago a man Magnus had recommended. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "This is Nora Kingswell," I said. "I have a new job for you. I need you to trace a 20-year timeline of trust fund disbursements. And then I need you to calculate the compound interest on $12 million since 2006. "That is a lot of math," the accountant said. "I love math," I replied. "And I need you to prepare a civil suit. I am not just suing for the money. I am suing for the emotional damages, the fraud, and the theft of opportunity. I want the house. I want the cars. I want the retirement accounts. I want the jewelry off my mother's neck." "Ms. Kingswell," the accountant warned, "if we do this, your parents will be destitute. They will be homeless." I looked at the signature on the release form. Isabella Kingswell. I thought about the night my mother told me I was born to be a shadow. "They stole my home for 20 years, I said into the phone. "It is only fair that I take theirs." I hung up. Clara stood by the door. She looked sad, but resigned. "You are a hard woman, Nora," she said softly. "I had to be," I said. "They built me this way, brick by brick." Clara nodded and slipped out into the hallway, leaving me alone with the box of secrets. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. The boardroom victory had been about saving the building. This was about balancing the ledger of my soul. Bella thought prison was the end. She was wrong. Prison provides 3 meals a day and a bed. When I was done with them, my family wouldn't even have that. I picked up the grandmother's letter again. Build something beautiful. "I will, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "But first, I have to clear the rubble." The driveway of the house in Lake Forest had not changed in 20 years. The hydrangeas were still manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the white pillars still gleamed with a pretension that masked the rot inside. But as I stepped out of the black town car, accompanied by Arthur, the fiercest litigator on Magnus Sterling's payroll, the house no longer looked like a fortress to me. It looked like a foreclosure. My parents and Bella were waiting in the living room. Bella was out on bail, her passport surrendered, a sleek black GPS monitor strapped to her ankle like a heavy shackle. She was wearing sweatpants, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, her face devoid of makeup. It was the first time I had seen her look her age, or perhaps look like the child she really was. My parents stood by the fireplace, trying to summon an air of indignant authority. But their eyes betrayed them. They looked tired. They looked frightened. They knew that the Asset Forfeiture Division had frozen Bella's accounts, but they didn't know why I was here. They thought this was a victory lap. They thought I had come to gloat about the board meeting. They were wrong. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to collect. "Nora," my father said, his voice tight, "if you have come to rub salt in the wound, you can leave. We have enough problems without your pettiness." "I am not here for pettiness. Robert," I said, refusing to call him Dad. I sat down in the wingback chair that used to be his favorite throne. Arthur stood silently behind me, holding a thick briefcase. "I am here for the trust." The room went deadly silent. My mother, Susan, dropped the tea towel she was holding. Her face turned the color of ash. Bella looked up from the floor, her eyes wide. They knew. In that split second of silence, their guilt screamed louder than any confession. "I don't know what you are talking about," my father blustered, though his hands were shaking as he reached for a glass of water. "What trust? Your grandmother died penniless." "Arthur," I said calmly. Arthur stepped forward and opened the briefcase. He laid the documents out on the coffee table with the precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. The original will from 2006, the fraudulent petition of incapacity, the withdrawal slip signed by Bella on her 18th birthday, the forensic accounting report detailing 20 years of theft. "My grandmother left me $12 million, I said, my voice steady. "You stole it. You claimed I was mentally disabled to get control of the funds, and then you funneled every cent into Bella's image. This house, the cars, the vacations, Bella's entire career. It was all paid for with my money." I looked at Bella. "And you knew. You signed the release. You knew every time you mocked my cheap clothes that you were wearing my inheritance." Bella shrank back into the sofa, pulling her knees to her chest. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "It was for the family," my mother cried, her voice shrill with desperation. "We had to survive. Your father lost his job in 2005. We would have lost everything. We did what we had to do to keep a roof over our heads." "You didn't just keep a roof," I corrected her. "You built a palace. You spent $12 million on appearances while I worked double shifts at a diner to pay for my textbooks. You let me live in a storage closet while you bought a boat. We were going to pay you back," my father shouted. "Once Bella made it big, once she was the CEO, we were going to take care of you." "You were never going to pay me back," I said. "You were banking on me remaining a failure forever so I would never hire a lawyer good enough to find the paper trail." Arthur cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Kingswell, under the statutes of Illinois regarding fiduciary duty and fraud, you are facing up to 30 years in prison. Each, Bella is already facing federal charges, but this would add grand larceny to her docket. No judge will grant bail for a second felony." My parents looked at Arthur, then at me. The reality of the situation crashed down on them. They weren't just looking at bankruptcy. They were looking at dying in a concrete cell. "What do you want?" my father whispered, the fight draining out of him. "I want justice," I said. I leaned forward. "Arthur has prepared a settlement agreement. You will liquidate everything. This house, the vacation condo in Florida, the cars, the jewelry, the retirement accounts, everything. You will sell it all, and you will repay the principal of the trust plus the statutory interest of 5% per year for 20 years. "That is impossible," my mother gasped. "If we sell everything, we will have nothing. We will be on the street." "Then you will know how I felt when I was 22, I said coldly. "But unlike me, you won't have a future to look forward to." "Nora, please," my mother wailed. She took a step toward me, then collapsed to her knees. My father, seeing his wife crumble, slowly lowered himself to the floor beside her. It was a sight I had never imagined. The two people who had towered over my life, who had made me feel small and worthless for 3 decades, were now kneeling on the Persian rug they had bought with my money. They were weeping. They were begging. "We are your parents," my father sobbed. "We gave you life. Please, don't send us to prison. Don't take everything. Leave us the house. Just the house. Please, Nora, have mercy." "Mercy?" I asked. "Did you have mercy when you forged a document saying I was mentally disabled? Did you have mercy when you watched me struggle to pay rent? Did you have mercy when you let Bella treat me like a servant?" I stood up. I looked down at them, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no joy. Just a profound, empty sense of closure. The cord was cut. "You don't owe me money," I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. "You owe me a life. You owe me the childhood I didn't have. You owe me the confidence you stole. But I have already taken that life back myself." I turned to Arthur. "Have them sign the asset surrender forms. If they refuse, call the district attorney and file the charges." "We will sign," my father cried, scrambling for the pen. Arthur held out. "We will sign. Just don't call the police." I watched them sign away their legacy. I watched them sign away the lies. When it was done, I walked to the door. "Nora," Bella called out. Her voice was small, trembling. "What about me? What am I going to do?" I looked at my sister, the golden child, the fraud. "You are going to learn how to build something real," I said, "or you are going to collapse. It is up to you." I walked out of the house. I didn't look back at the manicured hydrangeas. I got into the car and told the driver to take me to the city. 2 weeks later, the liquidation was complete. The house sold quickly. My parents moved into a small, rented apartment in a neighborhood they would have previously sneered at. They were living on Social Security. Bella was awaiting trial, likely facing 5 to 10 years. The check for the recovered funds sat on my desk. It was for nearly $9 million, all that was left after the debts were settled. I didn't deposit it into my personal account. I called the dean of the School of Architecture at the University of Illinois. I established the Eleanor Vance Scholarship. It was a full-ride grant for students from low-income backgrounds who showed exceptional promise in structural engineering and design. The money would ensure that no talented kid would ever have to choose between their dreams and their dinner, and no grandmother's legacy would ever be stolen again. I kept nothing. I didn't want their money. I didn't want anything that had touched their hands. On a crisp evening in early March, I took the private elevator to the roof of the Skyline Rebirth Tower. The building was finished. The top 20 floors had been reconstructed with the composite truss system I had designed. The steel was pure. The concrete was solid. It stood against the Chicago wind, unyielding and proud. I walked to the edge of the parapet. The city was a grid of light below me, a living, breathing machine of energy. The wind whipped my hair across my face, cold and biting, but it felt like a baptism. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened my contact list. I scrolled to Mother, delete. I scrolled to Father, delete. I scrolled to Bella, delete. Then, I went to the settings. I had filed the paperwork that morning. My legal name was no longer Nora Kingswell. I had taken my grandmother's maiden name. I was Nora Vance. The Kingswell line ended with a fraud and a prisoner. The Vance line began with a skyscraper. I heard the door open behind me. I didn't turn. I knew who it was. Magnus Sterling stepped up beside me. He was wearing his heavy wool coat, holding 2 crystal tumblers of amber liquid. He didn't speak. He just handed me a glass. We stood there in silence, looking out at the city we had built. "The sensor readings are perfect," Magnus said after a long time. "The sway is negligible. You fixed it." "It wasn't broken," I said, taking a sip of the scotch. "It was just built on a lie. I replaced the foundation." "And your family?" Magnus asked. "I don't have a family," I said. I looked at him. "I have a career, I have a legacy, and I have this building." Magnus clinked his glass against mine. A sharp, clear sound. "To the architect," he said. "To the ghost," I corrected him with a small smile, "who finally decided to haunt the living." I looked back at the skyline. I took a deep breath. filling my lungs with the cold, clean air. I was 32 years old. I had no parents. I had no sister. I had no safety net. But as I stood on top of the world, 80 stories in the air, I realized I had never been safer. I knew exactly how much load I could carry. I knew exactly where my breaking point was, and I knew I was nowhere near it. I was Nora Vance, and I was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to the story. This is our family's failure. If you enjoyed this tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, please let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Sunday Drama Stories. Like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.